Well, it's been clear that the Trump administration is very supportive of cryptocurrency, and I don't expect that there's going to be new overbearing regulation on cryptocurrencies, at least during the Trump administration. And not having significant regulation makes the U.S. a destination where crypto companies are interested in acting and interested in headquartering and being engaged. I don't really know what the Trump administration is thinking about, in terms of increasing the presence of cryptocurrency company. And I think we have to be careful because cryptocurrencies are competing with the US dollar. It's a separate and different store of value, but we want to also make sure that the US dollar continues to be the most used currency around the world.
Yes, President Donald Trump said that 2 weeks ago, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin asked him for help in resolving the war in Ukraine, according to Trump's remarks at the American Business Forum in Miami. Also, Trump stated that during their phone call, Putin claimed he has been trying to end the war for 10 years, but has been unable to do so. The U.S. president said, "I spoke to him 2 weeks ago, and he said we have been trying to settle that war for 10 years. We weren't able to do it. You got us settled." How do statements like these interact with ongoing sanctions, military aid, and diplomatic pressure on Moscow? And what do you think about this statement?
Well, Putin is lying to the American president. He's being very dishonest, and it's almost laughable that he would claim that he's been trying to resolve the war in Ukraine. He started the war in Ukraine. It was a war of choice. He gave the direction to the military to invade Ukraine. Obviously, this all started back in 2014, and this is the product of Putin's mismanagement of the foreign policy of Russia, of his interest in trying to take more territory and restore the Soviet Union and the empire that the Soviet Union had. And President Trump should push back against that notion, that he make clear that he doesn't accept the misinformation that Putin is putting out there about the origins of the war in Ukraine. But I expect this isn't going to change President Trump's approach to Ukraine, and he has put new sanctions on oil companies in Russia. That's a very welcome development. And the U.S. needs to continue to ratchet up sanctions and economic measures against Russia while also supporting Ukraine in other ways. A very important way he could support Ukraine is he's meeting with Orban, the head of Hungary, soon. And Hungary is holding up the accession talks for Ukraine to the EU. And it would be really great if Trump put pressure on Orban to withdraw its objection to Ukraine starting talks about joining the EU.
We're waiting for this visit and hope that everything will be good for Ukraine. Yes, President Donald Trump stated that the United States holds the status of the world's number one nuclear power, and noted that the country may be working on a denuclearization plan together with Russia and China, though he provided no further details. What might a U.S. led denuclearization plan with Russia and China entail, and what are the key obstacles to its implementation?
Well, it's hard to understand exactly what Trump's strategy is here, and maybe he doesn't want us to know because he announced new nuclear tests, which the United States hasn't done for 30 years or more. And Putin responded by saying now Russia is going to do nuclear tests. That's not a good development. That the moratorium on testing made it, at least incrementally less likely that a country would use nuclear weapons. And I would hope we would continue that moratorium. We obviously have to maintain our nuclear arsenal, but it's in our interest and world's interest for there to be no new testing of nuclear weapons and no development of new nuclear weapons. And we certainly don't want to see proliferation of nuclear weapons to other countries that don't have them already.
We see that Russia start to talk about these more and more. And we see how Russian propaganda continues, also campaigns spreading disinformation about NATO preparing to attack Russia. According to the Center for Counter Disinformation, Russian media are actively promoting an interview with Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko, in which he claims that NATO is practicing a scenario to block the Kaliningrad region while simultaneously reinforcing the region with the troops and equipment. The CCD calls this a typical Kremlin manipulation, of course, measures taken by NATO to strengthen the defense of its member states in response to repeated Russian provocation and threats of force against the Baltics, Poland, Finland, and other alliance members are being falsely portrayed as preparations for an attack on Russia. What do you think about this, and what measures can the international community take to expose and mitigate the impact of Russian propaganda? So, your opinion.
So, more dishonesty and misinformation from the Kremlin. It is in their interest to mislead their people into believing that there's a threat from NATO. There is no such threat from NATO. NATO has never posed a threat to Russia and Russian territory. NATO is a defensive alliance, and it is focused on just defending the borders of the countries that are part of NATO. And of course, Article 5 is the main convening provision in the NATO Charter that requires every NATO member to defend every other NATO member. And so when Russia engages in provocations against NATO, there needs to be a collective response that makes it clear that NATO is going to comply with the Article 5 obligations and protect all NATO countries. And what Russia wants to do is convince people that the war in Ukraine, which is a war of choice that Putin made, is a war of necessity for the defense of Russia. And that's simply not true. And anyone who has been there and who's studied the background for the war and the origins of the war should understand that.